There is a moment, a very specific, quiet, and deeply unsettling moment when the person who hurt you looks directly into your eyes and you notice it. Something changes behind their expression. Something flashes for just an instant. And in that brief second before they rearrange their face into whatever mask they need to wear next, you see it. You see the guilt. And what happens after that can completely transform everything you thought you understood about them, about yourself, and about why you have felt so confused for such a long time. Stay with me, because what you are about to discover is not simply information. It is the reflection you have been searching for, the one that finally reveals the truth. Before we continue, I need you to do something right now. If you have ever felt gaslighted, manipulated, emotionally drained, or quietly shattered by someone you cared about deeply, subscribe to this channel immediately. Not because it is merely a button, but because every single video here is created for you, for your recovery, for your clarity, for the version of yourself that is ready to stop suffering in silence and begin understanding exactly what happened and why. Subscribe now. Turn on notifications, because the truths we uncover here are the ones that can slowly, powerfully, and completely set you free. Now let us talk about what really happens when a narcissist knows they are guilty. You have probably spent months, perhaps even years, replaying conversations in your mind, trying to understand what went wrong, trying to figure out why after something painful happened, something they clearly did, something you felt deep inside was wrong. They somehow managed to reverse the entire situation until you were the one apologizing, until you were the one carrying the shame, until you were the one staring at the ceiling in the middle of the night, wondering whether you were losing your grip on reality, you were not losing your mind. What you were experiencing was one of the most sophisticated psychological defense mechanisms that exists within human emotional behavior. And it was not random. It was not accidental. It was a pattern, a deeply rooted, automatically activated pattern that emerges the moment a narcissist feels the cold presence of accountability approaching. The instant they feel exposed, something inside them does not respond with remorse the way a healthy person might. It does not reach for apology or repair. Instead, something ancient, frightened, and deeply defensive inside them switches into survival mode. And when a narcissist enters survival mode, the collateral damage is almost always you. Here is the first thing they do. And this one is so subtle that many people completely miss it until someone points it out. They become very, very quiet. Not the kind of silence that means they are reflecting, not the kind of silence that suggests genuine remorse. It is a calculated silence, a strategic stillness. It is the quiet of someone internally examining every possibility, every angle, every escape route before speaking a single word, because somewhere beneath all that ego and armor, they know they have done something wrong. And that silence is not peaceful. It is predatory. It is the stillness of something preparing to strike. You probably interpreted that silence as introspection. You likely gave them space, hoping that when they returned, they would come back with accountability, vulnerability, and the words you desperately needed to hear. But what they were doing in that silence had very little to do with you. They were building their defense. They were constructing the narrative that would protect them. And when they finally spoke, everything they said was designed not to repair the damage, but to redirect responsibility, because that is what comes next, the redirect. This is where your head begins spinning. This is where you start questioning your own perception. They do not deny what happened outright. That would be too obvious. Instead, they shift the emotional weight of the entire conversation onto something you did, something you said weeks earlier, something about your tone, something about your insecurities, something completely unrelated to the issue being discussed. And suddenly the thing they did, the thing that started the entire conversation, becomes almost irrelevant, because now you are defending yourself. Now you are explaining. Now you are the one trying to prove that your feelings are legitimate. Do you recognize that feeling? That dizzying, nauseating, emotionally exhausting sensation of trying to hold on to your original point while someone slowly dismantles your reality around you? That is called blame shifting. And when a narcissist knows they are guilty, it becomes one of their most powerful weapons. They cannot afford to sit with the truth. For most people, guilt is uncomfortable, but ultimately useful. It signals that something needs attention, repair, or change. But for a narcissist, guilt functions differently. Guilt feels like annihilation. It feels like a threat to their entire identity, because that identity is often built upon the belief that they are exceptional, superior, and beyond criticism. The moment guilt pierces through that armor, it does not simply sting. It threatens to collapse the structure holding everything together. So they convert it immediately, reflexively, desperately. And the emotion they most often transform guilt into is rage. You have seen this happen. The way a conversation about their behavior suddenly becomes a conversation about their anger. The way they become so offended, so outraged, so deeply wounded by the fact that you are even bringing up the issue that by the end of the discussion, you are no longer focused on your own pain. You are focused on theirs. You are asking whether they are okay. You are comforting the person who hurt you. You somehow find yourself in the position of soothing the very individual who owes you an apology. How does that happen? How does reality become so completely inverted? It happens because the narcissist has learned to weaponize emotional dysregulation. When you confront them with something they are guilty of, their internal system struggles to process it without feeling fractured. So instead of processing the fracture internally, they externalize it. They make their inner chaos your responsibility. They make their guilt your burden. And because you are an empathetic person who genuinely cares about the people you love, you reach out to catch them every time they fall apart. And they know you will. This is the part that can be the hardest to accept because it means that on some level, whether consciously or unconsciously, they understand exactly what they are doing. They understand that your compassion is the most effective tool available to them. They understand that if they perform enough pain, enough victimhood, enough wounded indignation, you will stop pursuing the truth and begin managing their emotions instead. Think about the last time you tried to hold a narcissist accountable. Think about how that conversation began and where it ultimately ended. Did you receive a genuine apology, or did you end up feeling guilty yourself? Did you end up apologizing for bringing the issue forward? Did you begin wondering whether you had been too harsh, too emotional, too sensitive, or too demanding? That is not an accident. That is a pattern. Now, I want to tell you about something that is not discussed nearly enough. Something that happens after the explosion, after the anger, after the blame shifting, after the redirection. Something that catches you completely off guard and makes you question everything all over again. They come back kind, not immediately. There is usually a period of distance first, but eventually they return. And when they do, they are warm. They are affectionate. They become the version of themselves you originally fell in love with. They may buy you something. They may plan something thoughtful. They may say exactly the words you have been longing to hear. They may look at you with the same eyes that once made you believe in them completely. And your heart, which has been bruised, confused, exhausted, and desperate for relief, begins to soften. This is called hoovering, and it is not love. It is maintenance. The purpose is not genuine connection. The purpose is restoring access. The purpose is keeping the bond intact without addressing the damage that created the rupture in the first place. This is why so many people remain trapped in cycles that seem impossible to escape. The cruelty is followed by kindness. The distance is followed by affection. The rejection is followed by reassurance. And each time it happens, your nervous system receives just enough relief to remain invested. You start believing that maybe this time things will be different. Maybe they finally understand. Maybe they finally see your pain. Maybe they are finally ready to change. But real change is not demonstrated through temporary kindness. Real change is demonstrated through accountability. Real change is demonstrated through ownership. Real change is demonstrated through consistent behavior over time. A narcissist who knows they are guilty may feel flashes of guilt. They may even experience moments of shame. But feeling guilt and accepting responsibility are not the same thing. One is an emotion. The other is a choice. And that distinction changes everything, because the question is not whether they feel guilty. The question is what they do when they feel guilty. Do they acknowledge the harm? Do they repair the damage? Do they listen without becoming defensive? Do they make meaningful changes? Or do they redirect, deflect, blame, rage, withdraw, and then return with temporary charm? The answer to those questions reveals more than any apology ever could. And perhaps the most important truth of all is this: Their guilt was never your responsibility. Their emotional wounds were never yours to heal. Their inability to face themselves was never your burden to carry. You spent so much time trying to understand them that you forgot to understand yourself. You spent so much energy trying to earn accountability from someone unwilling to give it that you neglected your own healing. The moment you stop chasing explanations from people committed to avoiding the truth is the moment your freedom begins. Because closure does not always come from them. Sometimes closure comes from finally seeing the pattern clearly enough that you no longer need them to admit it. Sometimes healing begins the moment you stop asking whether they know they hurt you and start asking why you have continued carrying pain that never belonged to you in the first place. And when that shift happens, something remarkable occurs. The confusion begins to fade. The self-doubt starts to loosen its grip. The fog slowly lifts, and for the first time in a very long time, you begin trusting yourself again. That is where your power returns. Not when they confess, not when they apologize, not when they finally understand, but when you finally understand, when you see the pattern clearly, when you stop internalizing their guilt, when you stop carrying responsibility for wounds you did not create, and when you remember that your healing was never dependent on their awareness, it was always dependent on yours. It is the narcissist recalibrating the relationship back into a state of stability so that the threat of accountability begins to fade away. Because as long as you are content, as long as you feel cherished, you are not challenging them. You are not examining things too closely. You are not asking the difficult questions they cannot genuinely answer. The kindness is not a resolution, it is a distraction. And it works with frightening consistency because you want so desperately for it to be authentic. This is the moment where I need you to pause and reflect with me. If everything you have heard so far has made your chest tighten, if it has made you feel understood in a way that is both comforting and heartbreaking, subscribe to this channel right now. This is your space for healing. Every video here is another piece of the puzzle you have been trying to put together in the dark. Subscribing is not merely pressing a button. It is a declaration that you are ready to understand what happened to you, that you are ready to stop living in confusion, and that you are ready to reclaim your power. Subscribe now and share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because someone you know may be living inside this confusion at this very moment and still lacks the language to describe it. Now let us go deeper. Let us talk about the silent treatment, because this is where the guilt-driven behavior of a narcissist becomes both psychologically sophisticated and emotionally devastating. When a narcissist gives you the silent treatment after being confronted, it is rarely about needing time or space to process their emotions. It is a punishment, a carefully deployed instrument of control designed to accomplish several goals at once. It punishes you for daring to hold them accountable. It creates enough anxiety and uncertainty inside you that you become willing to do almost anything to restore the connection. And this is the part that feels almost sinister in its precision. It places you in the position of reaching out first, which completely reframes the dynamic. Instead of them apologizing, you are now pursuing them. You become the one demonstrating that you value the relationship more. You become the one who, by reaching out, has implicitly surrendered the argument. They did not even have to speak. And somehow they won. The silent treatment is not truly silence. It is a scream. It is a scream that says, I refuse to be accountable, and I will make you pay for expecting me to be. And because most empathetic people experience emotional disconnection as a genuine emergency, the silence works again and again until they understand what it really is. The silence is guilt dressed in the costume of power, because a narcissist who is genuinely secure does not need to punish you for having feelings. The silent treatment only makes sense when you understand that beneath it lies something they cannot face, something that, if they were to speak honestly about it, would require accountability. And accountability is one of the most terrifying experiences imaginable for them. Now let us talk about the fake apology, because this is where things become almost unbearably cruel in their subtlety. There are moments when the narcissist appears to acknowledge the guilt. Moments when they say something that sounds very close to an apology. And during those moments, you feel something extraordinary. You feel hope. You feel recognized. You feel as though maybe, just maybe, they are capable of the emotional honesty you have been longing for. But pay close attention to how those acknowledgments are structured. There is a profound difference between "I was wrong and I hurt you" and "I am sorry you felt hurt." There is a profound difference between taking responsibility and merely performing the language of responsibility while accepting none of it. A narcissist who feels cornered will often give you words that resemble accountability. They will look directly into your eyes. Sometimes they will even cry. And they will say something that, on the surface, sounds exactly like what you needed to hear, but listen carefully to the structure. "I am sorry you feel that way. I am sorry if I hurt you. I should not have done that, but you have to understand where I was coming from. I take responsibility, but you also need to examine your role in this." Do you hear it? The deflection woven into the apology. The "but" that quietly erases everything that came before it. The immediate pivot back toward your behavior, your reactions, your responsibility. This is not an apology. It is the performance of an apology. Just enough of the appearance of accountability to silence your alarm bells while ensuring that the true weight of guilt never fully lands on them. And you, desperate for closure, desperate for the version of this person you love to finally be genuine with you, accept it. You finally exhale. You think to yourself, "Okay, we made progress." And then a few weeks later, the same thing happens again, because nothing actually changed. The apology was not a turning point. It was a pressure release valve, a way to release just enough tension so the relationship could return to a place where they once again felt safe and unthreatened. There is one more behavior that emerges when narcissists know they are guilty, and it is so counterintuitive that it almost seems impossible until you experience it firsthand. They become the victim, not subtly, dramatically, completely. The moment they feel the weight of their own wrongdoing pressing against the conversation, they find a way to position themselves as the most wounded person in the room. Suddenly, they are the ones who have been misunderstood. They are the ones who have sacrificed everything and received nothing but criticism in return. They are the ones who feel exhausted, unappreciated, and deeply hurt that you would even suggest they are capable of what you are describing. And you, who entered the conversation carrying a legitimate grievance, a real wound, and a genuine need for acknowledgement, suddenly find yourself watching someone perform a level of suffering that seems even greater than your own. And because you take other people's pain seriously, you hesitate, you soften, you begin questioning yourself. You wonder if perhaps you were too harsh. You wonder if you missed something important. You wonder whether they are actually the wounded one. This is called DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. It is one of the most well-documented patterns found within manipulative relationship dynamics, and it is devastatingly effective because it exploits the very qualities that make you a kind, caring, empathetic human being. Your ability to consider another person's perspective becomes the mechanism through which your own reality is erased. Your willingness to question yourself becomes the opening through which their narrative floods into your mind. Your compassion becomes the weapon they turn against you. And the cruelest part is that you spend so much time managing their manufactured suffering that your real suffering never gets addressed, never gets witnessed, never gets validated. You walk away not feeling heard, but feeling guilty, not feeling resolved, but feeling responsible, more isolated than you were before the conversation even began. Let me say something to you directly now, something I want you to feel deeply and carry with you. What happened to you was real. Your confusion is not a character flaw. Your pain is not an overreaction. Your desire for something genuine, stable, and emotionally safe is not neediness. It is human. It is healthy. It is exactly what every person who has ever loved another human being has the right to want and the right to receive. You were not too sensitive. You were not too demanding. You were not too much. You were simply given too little by someone who was incapable of giving you what you truly deserved. And the fact that you kept trying, kept hoping, kept reaching toward connection, even when it seemed to slip further away, does not make you foolish. It makes you someone who believes in love, someone whose capacity for loyalty, devotion, and commitment is extraordinary, someone who continued to see possibilities where others might have walked away, someone who held on to hope because hope is part of your nature. And while that hope may have been used against you, it is not a weakness. It is evidence of the depth of your heart. The goal now is not to lose that capacity. The goal is to learn where it belongs, who deserves it, and how to protect it from those who only see it as something to exploit. The tragedy is that those beautiful qualities were entrusted to someone who could only view them as leverage. But here is what I need you to understand fully and completely. That capacity within you is not the problem. It never was the problem. It is one of your greatest gifts. It simply needs to be directed toward people who are capable of receiving it without turning it against you. And most importantly, it needs to be offered to yourself before it is given to anyone else. Because the most significant relationship you will ever have is the relationship you maintain with your own perception, with your own reality, and with your own inner experience of what is true. When a narcissist feels guilty, nearly everything they do is designed to separate you from that relationship. Their behavior is intended to make you distrust your own eyes, your own ears, and your own emotions. It is meant to create enough noise, uncertainty, and confusion that you can no longer hear your own clarity. It is designed to make you dependent on their version of reality because you have gradually lost confidence in your own. Your healing begins the moment you decide that your perception matters, the moment you stop seeking outside validation for something you already know internally, the moment you stop needing them to admit what they did before allowing yourself to believe that it happened. You know what happened. You have always known that knowing is sacred. Protect it with everything you have. Clarity is your greatest strength. As long as you remain confused, as long as you continue questioning your own perception, as long as you stay trapped in the self-doubt their behavior has carefully cultivated, you remain manageable. You remain controllable. You remain caught in orbit around their reality instead of standing firmly within your own. But the instant you understand what is truly happening, the instant you can identify the behavior, recognize the pattern, and see it for what it actually is, instead of what they convinced you it was, something changes, something fundamental, something permanent, something irreversible. Because once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. Once you recognize the pattern, you cannot unknow it. And that knowledge, however painful it may be, marks the beginning of your freedom. Everything you have felt throughout this video, every moment of recognition, every sharp breath of realization, every quiet exhale that came from finally feeling understood, those feelings are not random. They are your inner voice, the voice that has been trying to reach you through all the noise, all the manipulation, and all the confusion. The voice that is finally being given a moment of clarity to speak. Listen to it. You are not crazy. You are not too much. You are not the problem. You are someone who loved deeply in an environment that was never safe for deep love. And now you are here, learning, awakening, reclaiming the clarity that was slowly and systematically taken from you. That is not merely healing. That is transformation. That is liberation. And I need you to take that transformation seriously, because there are thousands of people watching this right now who have spent years believing they were the problem. People who convinced themselves they were too sensitive. People who believed they were somehow incapable of making love work. People who blamed themselves for wounds they did not create. They deserve to know the truth just as much as you do. So here is what I am asking you to do, and I am asking with the full weight of how much this matters. Subscribe to this channel right now. Click the like button because it helps this message reach people who desperately need to hear it. Leave a comment below and tell me the exact moment in this video where you felt understood, because your voice matters and this community benefits from hearing your experience. Share this video with someone who is still living inside the confusion, someone who is still questioning themselves, someone who is still carrying guilt that was never theirs to carry, someone who still believes they are the problem when they were actually responding to a problem. You found this video for a reason. That reason is not an accident. That reason is not random. It is you choosing yourself, possibly for the first time in a very long time. It is you beginning to trust your own perception again. It is you beginning to reclaim your own voice. It is you beginning to step out of the fog and into clarity. Do not stop now. Do not turn away from the truth now that you can finally see it. Keep learning. Keep growing. Keep paying attention to what your instincts have been trying to tell you all along. because every step you take toward clarity is a step away from manipulation. Every step you take toward self-trust is a step away from control. Every step you take toward your own truth is a step toward freedom. You have survived more confusion than most people will ever understand. You have carried questions that should never have been yours to carry. You have doubted yourself in situations where your instincts were trying to protect you. And yet you are still here, still listening, still searching for truth, still choosing growth over denial. That matters. It matters more than you know, because healing does not begin when the person who hurt you finally tells the truth. Healing begins when you stop waiting for their version of the truth and start trusting your own. That is where your power lives. That is where your clarity lives. That is where your freedom begins.